Weathering, mechanical and chemical. There are two types of weathering. There's mechanical weathering and then there's chemical weathering. So let's talk about weathering in general. So what is weathering? Weathering is the breakdown of Earth's crust or rock into smaller pieces. The smaller pieces do not move to a new location until erosion carries them away. There are many types of mechanical and chemical weathering, and we'll talk about some of them in a little bit. But weathering is the first step in forming soil. So, what is mechanical weathering? Well, mechanical weathering is the breakdown of rock into smaller pieces without any change in the chemical composition of its minerals. Mechanical weathering can sometimes be called physical weathering, and it's when rock is broken apart by physical force rather than by chemical breakdown. So, one type of mechanical weathering is called ice wedging. And what ice wedging is it is when water fills joints of rocks and then it freezes. That water will then expand when it freezes, pushing that rock apart. And then when this is repeated, that repeated freeze and thaw cycles over and over again over years will cause the rock to break down along the joint. Another type of mechanical weathering is called moving water or abrasion. And this is when rocks, excuse the bell, guys. This is when rocks hit each other, breaking them into smaller pieces. So, surface water is one example of moving water in mechanical weathering. It happens in rivers and streams, and moving water moves rock and sediment, breaking apart rock, and then it's breaking down stream and riverbeds. You can look at the pictures from some examples of what this looks like. Another example of moving water in mechanical weathering are waves. Waves are water and sediment where they batter the landscape, and the weaker rock will weather quicker than the stronger rock. And then moving on, another example of mechanical weathering is wind. And this is called wind abrasion. So wind moves a small sediment. The sediment will then hit rock and it breaks apart into smaller pieces. The weaker rock weathers quicker as well. The next type is exfoliation. Exfoliation or unloading, either one, pressure causes the rock to break off into sheets along joints which are parallel to the surface. So if you look at this picture, you can kind of see that here. And this is caused by an expansion of rock due to uplift and removal of surface material that originally buried that rock. And this example of exfoliation is from Enchanted Rock, which is here in Texas. All right, another type of mechanical weathering is temperature, thermal expansion. Repeated daily heating and cooling of rock. The heat causes expansion, which means to get bigger, wider. Cooling causes contraction, which means to get smaller or compact, come back together. Different minerals expand and contract at different rates, causing the rock to split. And there's an example here at the bottom. The next type of mechanical weathering is biotic. Biotic, which we all know now, means life. And weathering caused by living organisms is called biotic. Plant roots act as a wedge and widen cracks. So, like in this tree here, you'll see how that tree is widening that crack. Burrowing animals can also break down the rock. So, on the left hand side, you see these animals that dig to burrow and they break down that rock as well. And the reason why it's called biotic is because it's broken down by life. So animals and plants are both living things. Now let's look at chemical weathering. Those examples before were the different types of mechanical weathering. So let's look at chemical weathering now. So what is chemical weathering? Chemical weathering is chemical reactions that break down the bonds holding the rock together, causing them to fall apart. Chemical weathering occurs in all types of rock, and rock can react with water, gases, and solutions. So one type of chemical weathering is called oxidation. And oxidation is when oxygen combines with other elements in rocks to form new types of rocks. The new substances due to oxidation, the rock is softer than the original, It's easier for other forces to break the rock apart. It's rusting of the rock and color change in the rock. So if you look at the pictures on the right, you'll see that rusting and that color changing. Another type of chemical weathering are acids. Acids are chemicals dissolved in water making acid. So an example of this would be acid rain. A weak acid is formed when CO2 in the air mixes with rain, and acid is too weak to harm plants and animals, but slowly causes feldspars and limestone to decompose or break down. So you'll look at these and you can see the difference from 1908 to the present. Acid rain broke that down. Um, Acidic groundwater is another form of acid, and acid rain seeps into the ground, dissolving limestone. So the acid rain goes down to the ground and dissolves limestone. You can see some examples of this here under groundwater. Chemical weathering, another type, biotic. So organisms create acids, and then those acids break apart the rock into smaller pieces, and it creates soil. So we can see here, biotic or life creating acids that break down those rocks to create soil. And that is it. Those are examples of mechanical and chemical weathering. So now you're going to go through the questions and you're going to answer the questions based on these slides. I will put a copy of the slides on each question so that you can look back on it to refer back to. But you can always use this video to help you.